So who's the king of the hill when it comes to World War II gaming? Let's talk about it. Jay here with Nerd Rage Against the Machine. Today we're going to talk about miniatures wargaming, and specifically World War II. Now, pretty much when I got out of collecting toys as a kid, I kind of went right into role-playing and also into miniatures gaming. And it's kind of an obvious thing, you know, you go from collecting toys in one scale to collecting toys in another with the justification of, well, there's an advanced set of rules to explain them, to use them. They're not just toys, they're highly detailed models that that you use to move for position in different war games, and also they are toys. Sorry, it's true. So I've been wargaming for some time, from traditional Warhammer 40k back in the Rogue Trader days to, you know, Starfleet battles, BattleTech, the whole nine yards. And as I've gotten older, I'll be honest, historical games have really appealed to me. One reason for that is the fact that you lack what I'm going to call the G.I. Joe factor. And what I mean by that is, in a historical war game, there's no new factions coming out. There's no, you know, the Dreadnoks or the Tau for 40k fans. Those new groups that just show up out of nowhere and seem to kick a lot of ass because the miniatures company wants to sell these new models. Therefore, you know, that notion of codex creep. Case in point, when Bolt Action here came out, there was talk about the Japanese, and most people speculated what the Japanese were going to look like in Bolt Action, and they more or less do. So saying that, when it comes to World War II, there are really two big games that most people have heard of. Now, these are by no means the only World War II miniatures games, and I don't want to get that impression through at all, especially if you're not new enough to the channel, and for those of you who are you know, old hats to this, who are thinking that's what he's saying. No, these are just the two that are probably the most popular and therefore also the easiest to get into. These are the gateway games. There are things like Chain of Command and other great miniatures games, Rommel, but these two are very easy to get into and pretty easily available in that gaming space. But they're also, again, kind of a Coke and Pepsi scenario here. We have two great games, but they're very different. So this video, I'm kind of going to review both products with a compare and contrast to kind of give you maybe an idea of what it is if you wanted to get into World War II miniatures gaming, which one would really suit you best. So let's get into these games a little closer. So these are probably the two biggest miniatures games, as I said before. Let's start with Flames of War. Flames of War is by Battlefront, and this is the 4th edition of Flames of War, so they've gone through 3 editions. The game is very solid. It is also 15 millimeter. It's a great game for those big battles. The Battle of Omaha Beach, Stalingrad, really, I think, really work well here. And that is probably the biggest difference between it and its main competitor, Bolt Action, is scale. And I know that seems pretty obvious, especially when you're seeing models from both games laid out here that, you know, these guys are twice as big as these guys, but that scale also refers to scale of time. The average infantry in this moves 8 inches. The average infantry in Bolt Action moves 6, so bigger but slower. And that's because of the fact that, again, the action here is more compact. This is a longer takeover time. And speaking of time, that also goes to how these games work differently. Flames is what we call a you go, I go system, meaning that we roll initiative, I move and fire and do all my actions with my units, then you do the same with yours. Bolt Action, on the other hand, uses a completely different thing. And before I get into that, let's talk a little bit about the book, actually. So this is Bolt Action's 2nd edition. They've had 2 editions. It's actually written by Rick Priestley for Warlord Games, and Alessio Cavatore is the other writer. Don't want to forget that guy as well. Rick, though, is the guy who actually wrote, Rick Priestley wrote Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader, so kind of the father of that. And Alessio Cavatore has also worked with, or for Warhammer and for Games Workshop, so there's a lot of knowledge about that game baked into this as well. This game is kind of feels a little more, it is a little more in the scale of Warhammer, so squad-based. And as I said, the big difference is that initiative system. So in Bolt Action, how initiative works is that each single unit, so a squad of men, a single tank, a single weapon team like this little mortar team here, each gets one order die. And the order dice has 6 different orders on it, which you will then choose and lay next to the unit once you pick it. So for every unit you have on the table, let's say you have 10 units, you would get 10 order dice. If your opponent has 11, he gets 11 order dice. And then they're each put into a bag together, shaken, and then you pull out one. Whichever one you pull out, that's whose unit gets to move first. You choose the unit, so like in this case I have an American mortar team and I have an American Ranger squad here, so I would, if I pull a green die, I could choose to use the mortar team over the Rangers, but it's still my turn. If they'd pulled a gray German die, I'm going to wait. And what that does is it really staggers movement, it creates a lot of chaos on the field, and makes the player think more about how to make lemonade out of those lemons they get. I really need that order die to move so I can get him in this position. Isn't a guarantee, where with Flames you do have a little more of a guaranteed control over what you can and can't do in a turn. So, I can see where some people might not like this. I personally think it's amazing. It's one of my favorite things about this game. You Go, I Go is a pretty simple thing, but it's been used a lot, and there are some definite disadvantages, not the least of which is, for some people, it can always feel like he who hath initiative won the battle. Not necessarily true, but it can definitely feel that way at times, and depending upon how it's implemented. Now, saying that, one thing to also point out about both these games is kind of the entry cost. I think that's a big thing, especially when starting a game. Now, again, if you really want Bolt Action, or if you really want Flames of War, it's probably worth whatever the difference is in cost. I would say they kind of even out as well. Flames is the cheaper start. For like $50, you can get Hit the Beach, which is their starter set, which comes with a selection of models, a softcover, small version of this rule book, all the unit cards, and everything you need to play out the battles. Now with Bolt Action, it's the Band of Brothers set's $100 and $120, somewhere in that range. And again, yes, you can always get deals on Amazon for either set, so that that cost may be different. But you get a smaller softcover version of the rule book here, and you get a couple squads of Americans, a squad of Germans, as well as a half track and a little bit of terrain, which is a lot smaller collection than what you get here, not just in size, but in the totals of units. One half track versus, this is actually the American half of that Hit the Beach box set, and you can see there's 8 tanks there, 8 Shermans, so that's a pretty significant difference. But again, both these starter sets are set up to whet your appetite. They're not a full experience of the game. You're going to want more, and that's one thing to consider. And in the case of the Flames of War, this book does not include much in the way of additional units or anything. So you're going to be buying probably this book here, Fortress Europe, or other books, so that you have army lists to go on, so that you know which units you can use. Bolt Action comes with a pretty hefty, what they call a get you by roster for 4 armies: American, British, German. Actually, I think it's 5 now: Soviets, and then Japanese, which is also in the hardback version. Now, again, they do make, I've got them over here, plenty of army books for the more elaborate material, but again, it's not necessary right away, whereas in this case, yeah, with Flames, get yourself an army book or 2 almost immediately, which again is going to up that cost. Also, cost of units goes that way as well. You're getting more men in a box like this, but you're going to get more detail out of these. And again, really that scale is a big part of this. If you like, if you like 15 millimeter, then by all means, Flames is great for that. And if you like the 28 millimeter, these are great for that. One other thing to point out, of course, and while I think both of these rule sets are great, don't get me wrong, is one of the other beauties of historical wargaming is that if you don't like these rule sets, a lot of times you can scale. I've seen people play Bolt at 15 millimeter. I've seen people try Flames at 28 millimeter, and even using additional, different rules such as, like I said before, Rommel or chain of command. You don't have to ditch your entire army and start again if you want to try chain of command. You could use your Flames of War, your bolt action miniatures pretty easily, which again is a huge benefit of historical wargaming over the more fantasy sci-fi stuff. Saying that, I'm going to say both games are good. I would give bolt action a 5 out of 5 because it is my preferred game. I'm going to give Flames a 4 out of 5. But most of this is about preference. At the same time, I like the scale better. I like the initiative and the pin system, which is used for morale to an extent, and for command, which this does not have. This is a very standard set of rules. It's also a very tank-heavy set of rules, whereas this is a very infantry-heavy set of rules. And so, yeah, sometimes you feel like playing a tank game. This works really well. Now, there is a tank book for this, I know, but honestly, I still think this as an infantry game. It also works better as a skirmish game. There's no way that Flames is a good idea for a skirmish game, considering you have a minimum of 4 guys or so on a stand normally. So while they have their benefits, their drawbacks, I think they are both valid games, both good games. I would recommend either of them, but again, it really comes down to doing the research of what you want. If you want a bigger scale, more units on the table for the table size, I think Flames is the better choice. However, if you're happier with more engaging mechanics and more personal battles, you cannot beat bolt action in my opinion. With that being said, all I can say is I bid you adieu and happy gaming.